Okay, so are you guys aware with JSP, Servlet, HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, MySQL, JDBC, and MVC,
Actually,
Maven things?
um, not all the things, but some things. We
Okay.
have some new.
Okay, so it's a Maven project. The first thing you have to understand the Maven, and the other thing is architectural, it is MVC. Okay, model view controller. Okay, so for that I will explain you also. Also, you can follow this tutorial that I'm going to share with you. Have you heard about the MVC architecture, Eba?
No.
Okay.
Actually, we have a knowledge of HTML, CSS, JS, and some of Node.js.
Okay, so I will recommend it you to go with this complete tutorial one by one. It will clear your basics and like you can revise your basics, and this complete project built according to this tutorial. So here what you will get the complete technology and tools and technology that we're using this project. So all the details are description with description is display here. Also you will get the video tutorial as well. Apart from that, you can go one by one, like how can we create a Maven project, how to create header, footer, and step by step things, and all these things I will explain in a while as well. But before we start, we need to understand the two things. The completely project is based on the Maven MBC architecture. So if I got something, is processing slow or there's some connection issue? Okay, so I'm not able to
No
hear.
connectivity is fine here. I don't know
Okay.
about that.
So whenever we are going to develop any application, we divide the development part into the three parts. The first is model, view, and controller. Okay, so
Okay.
what is view, what is model, and what is controller? You have to understand this thing first. So the view is responsible whatever the things user can see from the front end side, like you can see a link, you can see a header, you can see a image, you can see an input button, you can see a input like a text field. What are the things that is visible to the end user will come under the view part, and this is come from the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Bootstrap. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, where the HTML used to define the like element, and CSS will used to make over the things. Now when user interact with your view part and they will perform some operation, let's suppose user enter username and password and hit the login button, then a request will send to the controller. Okay, controller is a mediator in the process. He will controller will get the request and send the response accordingly. Next thing, the database. So database is come from the like the third part of the MVC, which is the database transaction. Like we are communicating with a indirectly or directly, we are communicating with a MySQL database. Okay, so this is the third party tool. So uh, database is related to the MySQL, and all the JDBC related transaction query will come under the model part, and under the controller part will keep all the servlets that is responsible to handle the request and response. So the flow will be like the page will send to view to controller, controller to model, model to controller, controller to view.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So you can read out the details here. I will give you an example how these things are using into the project. Okay. So this is your project. When you open the src.main Java, here we have a dedicated package for the controller. So controller contain all the servlets that will be responsible to handle the request that coming from the user end. Another thing, we have a database. For the database, we have a model that will be responsible to do all the database transaction that is required to communicate with data.
Okay.
Okay, so it contain all the get user, add user, get primary key, or you can say the update the data, delete the data. So all these things, all these Java methods business methods will come under the model package. For the view part, as we are using JSP servlet, JSP and HTML with CSS will come under the web folder. So what are the thing you can see under the web folder, which is a part of a view. So under the view, we have a JSP. And why we are using JSP here? Because JSP have a capability to handle the Java code also. So we are handling the response at the front end side. So JSP have that capabilities that JSP we can write the HTML code as well as Java code. So the response handling code will be also there. That's why we are using JSP in like in place of HTML. So in JSP also we are writing the same HTML code, but at somewhere it's as per the requirement we are writing the request code for the uh, HTML part. Now understand the complete architecture one by one. Now you have familiar with the MVC and the process, how things will go. But before that, let's understand the complete classes that we are using, complete project architecture that we're using here. So we have the very first class, very first package is there called bean. So under the bean, we have a base bean. So these are the beans related to the project. So under the bean, what we do, we convert the attributes into an object. Like it is a concept of encapsulation where we are wrapping our attributes into a multiple attributes into a single object. So that's why we are creating bean for every required part of the application. And here we are
Mm.
just defining the variables and then we are passing the getter and setter as per the requirement. So this is the base bean, so it will be common bean for the all the beans and all other beans will extend this bean to use this its capability. This is the concept of inheritance. Okay, here you can see we are extending the bean as base bean.
The bean package is available in Java, or we have created this one.
No, these all the things that you can see here that's created by us. Okay, it's not coming
Okay.
automatically from the Java. This is just concept.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so we have a feedback bean. Under the feedback bin we have three variables here there we have for those variable we are creating getter and setter so that will convert our feedback object feedback attributes into a single object. Similarly we are using invoice bean, part bean, and according to the requirement we can create that much packages, or if you can say the plans like, oh, it's a totally depend over the requirement or the module of the application. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So after the bean, okay. So after bean, we have a controller. So controller will be responsible to handle our request and response that is coming from the front end. So for each module or each project, we have a separate controller. Let's suppose we have a change password functionality. So for that, we have a change password controller. For the feedback thing, we have a feedback controller, feedback list controller to display the list. Similarly, for all the parts or of the page, we have a separate controllers are there that will be responsible to handle the request and responses that is coming from the front end and the model part. Another package, we have an exception that will be responsible to handle all the exception that is coming from the application side. So these are some custom some custom exception that can be that can become according to the requirement or according to the uses of the application. So database exception that is coming from the database side, duplicate exception that might be get a duplicate records into the database, so it will be usable whenever we use it. Under the model package, we have a model classes. I'm going to give you demo of one class here. So the user model is there. Under the user model, all the database transaction related to the model we are using here. Okay, so we have like sometime we need to get the data from a key. So we have a primary key method here that will be responsible to get data from the database. Another, we have a add user method. So this add method will user will take all the response data from the front end from the controller, and it will get the data and send data to the database, and all the insert queries and the database connection will be created from here only. And we'll see one flow in the end of the session how the methods and code is working over there, but I'm just giving you an overview of the classes that we are using here. So under the util package, we have a different classes according to the requirement. We have a multiple classes that is a helper of the entire project from the Java side. So let's suppose we have a data utility. Under the data utility class contain all the methods that define the formattation of the application, like what kind of date format should be there in case if I need to convert a string value into a string object. So we are calling this get a string. It will take a string value and give us a pure string. Similarly, we have another club another method here that get. string data. It take an object into as a parameter and convert that object into a string and return it. So according to the requirement, we can call all the conversion related data methods from this data utility. It contain all the methods like get int. So this is converted string into a integer, and this converted string into a long. So according to the requirement, in the whole project we can call it. Similarly, we have data validator. Data validator will use to validate the data that is coming from the front end. So the view part, these data validator will be used at the time of controller. So whatever the data coming from the front end, this data validator will be responsible to validate the data. So let's suppose if I need to validate the data as name or not, so I will call this. Let's suppose I need to verify the email, verify phone number, password. So all the methods, all the validation methods are there. Under this validation, these are using the regex format. So you can read it about more about the regex format. How can we create a regex string to verify a data or validate the data? Another thing and usable thing is the HTML utility that we are using. Sometime we have to write the HTML with Java. So the data is coming from the backend or the database in the list format, and somehow we have to display that list into a drop down option. So we are using get list here. That is a custom method that will return a complete pure code to display a drop down list. JDBC data source is the most important class here because we are using this to create a connection with a database. Like we have a database which is a third-party application. So we have to create a connection before perform the database transaction. So what we need a URL, we need a username, we need a password. Your database is running on some port number on some address. You can see here it's running over the localhost /3306. So this is your URL and the port number, and the username password is root and it's depend. So this JDBC data source have two main method, which is one is a get connection and close connection. So whenever I need to create a connection with the database, I will call the get connection, and whenever I need to close the connection, I will call the close connection from here. Property reader file will help us to read the property from the external resources. So in this project, we have one property file which is under the resources. So whatever the external configuration thing required for any project will keep this thing into a system.property file. So we have this system.property file. So this file will contain data into a form of value, key and value. So these are the key and these are the value, these are the key and these are the value. So according to this, we are calling this data from in our application. So for that, we are using this get reader. So this will help us to read the data from the system.property. So here we are passing the complete path of the file and creating object of request bundle, and this resource bundle will give us a method that is a get value. So whenever I need to get any value, I will just call this method get value, pass the key, and it will return me a value. The example, for example, you can see into the JDBC data source, we are getting the data from this. So again, we have created object, and from here we are passing the key, get a string value, we are passing the key, and we are getting the exact value here. Next method we have, the next class we have a servlet utility. So servlet utility will be used to verify the as a helper for the servlet classes, all the controller package. So this class will be used into the controller only. So this is the helper for the servlet. So what servlets do, servlet during the servlet operation, what we have to do, we have to share the request, we have to handle the request response. Like sometime view send a request to controller, so controller need to forward the request, redirect the request. Sometimes we have to set the message with the request. So these all the custom methods are there that will help us to perform operation over the servlet. So to, in case if I need to forward some requests, I will call the this forward method and just pass the URL on which I need to forward it. So it will work similarly, and same for the redirect. And in case I need to set any error message and some success message, I can call these methods. So these are the very important. After that, here these are the JDK versions that we are using. Like Maven dependencies are there. So we are using some third-party applications that, like MySQL is a third-party application. So we need var APIs or jar APIs that will give us support to use their capabilities. So these Maven dependency will be managed from the pom.xml. So whenever we need to add any dependency or remove any dependency, we'll use this dependency tag. So let's suppose I am removing this and I save it, and the project is building over there, and it will remove the dependency for the MySQL. You can see the MySQL dependency is gone here. I just revert it and save it. After some time, when the project is built, it will become again. You can see here. So these are the Maven dependencies to manage the third-party dependencies that we are using. Application is deployed over the Tomcat server. So we have integrated the Tomcat server. So it's showing Apache Tomcat, the version of the server, and it's using Java as a 1.8. So these are the JRE libraries. Under the source thing, we have all the front-end data. So we have dedicated JSP page to handle the JSP forms, and CSS to manage the CSS and styling part, and the images folder to handle all the images that is available in this project. Okay, do you have any question till now? Anyone?
Uh, right now, no. Actually,
Okay,
yeah, I have a query. Actually, yesterday when the
See,
configuration
we
was,
haven't done the servlet part yet. We haven't studied.
yeah,
okay. I
So,
will explain the one end-to-end flow, and then you can go
okay.
later on go with it. And I will also recommended you to go with this and check out whatever the things I just explained you is available in the detail part here. You can see here the data utilities are there, data validators are there, servlet utilities, JDBC data source. How can you create a simple registration form, login form, logout, and all the things are available over there.
okay.
Okay, so I will give you one end-to-end flow of one model, how the code flow is working over there. Okay, so let's follow the MVC and take an example of login form. Okay, so for every module or every page, we have a separate JSP file. Let's suppose we are using an example of login view. As you said, you have knowledge of the HTML. So in HTML, we have
Yeah.
a form tag. Okay, under the
Mm,
form tag, what we do under the action, we pass any controller, any server side class that will help us to send the data to the server. So here we have a login form that is start from here, and here we are passing the data under the post method and to the login controller. So this data will be responsible now whenever user will enter this complete data input data and hit this submit button, that whole data will send to the login controller. Okay, so login view to login controller. Login controller means now the data will send to the servlet. Servlet will come under the controller. So now here into here you can search for the login controller. It should be there. Okay, here is a login controller. Now the data will come, and first the data will be validate. So we have a validate method here into the login controller. So what this validate method will do, this will get the data in the form of single attributes. So you can see we are calling here data validator dot is null. First we are verifying the data should not be null. So data coming in the form of login with the name of login and the password. So we are getting the data. Also we are verifying the data should be valid from the front end that is coming. Now we are populating the bean. Now here in the populating bean, what we are doing, whatever the data coming from the front end, we are converting the data into an object. So here we will use of all the beans. So why the beans is used? Bean used to convert the attributes into a single object. So we have a multiple attributes ID, login and password. We are converting
mm,
them into a user object. So what we do, we will just call a object of user bean. We'll create a bean dot set id. We have a setter and getter method into our beans. So we'll call the setter and set the value that is coming from the front end, request dot get parameter id, login and the password, and it will return a bean object that contain all the username and the password. Now the multiple properties are converted into a single object, but this data, this method will call later. I'm just explaining you the flow. First, whenever the user will hit the login button, the data will come to the post method of servlet. It will hit here. Under this post, we will call the populate beans and all these classes. on all the methods. So here at the very first, I'm calling the populate method, and whatever the request coming from the front end, it will pass as a request and it will return me a complete object. So this is the role of populate bean here. Now populate bean have a data. Now the next step will be we have to send the data. We have validated the data, we have populated the bean. Now we have to send the data controller to models to check if the username and the password is available or not into the database. So now we have to create an object of model. So we have created an object of model here, user model, and then we will call the authentication method from the model, and we are passing bean.get login and bean.get password. Now we have entire data into a bean, so we can use a getter and setter freely. Now similarly, if you go into the model, we have a user model, like the login part is related to the user, so it will go and hit the login button and it will pass the username and the password. So under the user model, if you search for the authentication method, okay, here we have authentication method that take as an input username, login, and the password. After that, it will create a object. It will create a connection with the JDBC data source. But it will try to create a connection to the database. So to create a connection, we have a get connection method that is under the JDBC data source. So we will call the connection from JDBC data source. We will pass the query and select a stick from the user where login equals to, that is coming from the front end. We set the data, login ID and the password, and we will get a request query from the backend the database according to the response. If the data is available, it will display some long value. Otherwise, it will display a message or some error message like something went wrong or data is not available, something like that. That thing will be returned again to the in the form of bean. Like what we are doing here, we are getting the data from the database, and again we have created an object of user bean, a null object that is clear our previous object, and then again we have set all the ID, first name, login, password, all the attributes into that bean, and it will return to a single bean. Now login controller will get that bean and check if it is null or not. Why checking null or not? If the user is exist into the database, it will return some value, otherwise it will return null. So we are verifying the data, and here we are creating a session to perform the login and logout operation. And after that, we are calling the redirect and forward method from the servlet utility to send the user at the welcome page. Otherwise, it will send a error message like login ID and the password. If everything is good, it will send to the welcome controller. So it means it's going over the welcome page. Otherwise, it will send a error message. Now this, where it will send the data again, the flow is going login view to login controller to user model to login controller, and login controller to again view. So again we have moved to the view, and we have here again the get methods messages from the servlet utility to display. If everything is good, then it will display the success method, otherwise it will display the error message. Okay.
Mm.
Okay, similarly, same thing. I will give you another example, and that also follow the same thing. And all the modules, all the pages are using the same thing. So I'm going to give you understanding over the user registration. So during the user registration, what we have to do, we have to insert the data into the database. If user come to the website, register the data, and enter some data and hit the sign up button, the data should be inserted into the database after checking all the validation operations. So similarly, as login, we have a form here. So this is our form, and when the form will submit, the data will be sent to the registration control method to the post method. So the user registration control is a controller. So when this submit button will hit, all the username, password, and all the things are there. When this operation will perform as a registration, the data will be sent to the user registration controller. Here we have Now in the controller, we have a same method, which is called the same class, which is called user controller. Now where it will hit the post method. So let's move to directly to the post method. It's also using the validation and the populate beans, but it will call under the post method. So here we are getting the data, we are populating the bean in a similar way. And again, what now, or now what we have to do, now we have to perform the database operation. We have to register the user. So again, we have created an object of user model, and then we'll call a register user method from the database, from the model part. And this registration method will be responsible to insert all the data, and it will take an input as a user vein, that is the data that is coming from the front end. So I'm going on this method. Again, in this method, as a register user, we are calling another method, that is add bean. So this will be responsible to add the data. Let's move to the add now. So in the add, again, what we are doing, we are creating a connection with the data, JDBC data source, get connection. We are passing the SQL query, SQL statement, insert into the user, whatever the data that is coming from the front end. And we set the data as per the bean.get first name, all the data. And then it will return a long confirmation in form of primary key, like data is inserted. If everything goes fine, it will redirect there. Otherwise, it will give an error. So here into the controller, in the same manner, it will return a primary key, and we will check if everything is okay. It will set a success method, and user registered successfully, and it will forward it to the user registration view page. Other, in case of any error, it will give a login ID already exists or some kind of error. Okay, and then again, the data will be back sent to the user view registration, and will display the message as the error or get success. If you have,
Right now, uh, like for everything, we have a controller, a view, and a model.
yes,
These three things.
all other classes are a helper, are the helpers.
Okay.
Okay, so all the for a single page, there are a JSP, there are a controller, it means servlet, there are a model, it means database transaction. So the controller and view will be same for the, we are changing the methods into the model only according to the requirement, according to the request that coming from the front end. We are calling the class, we are calling the method operation from the model only.